So in this video, I want to talk to you about a particular issue that's going on in America. It's a very heated debate and it's occurring on Twitter between Elon Musk, Vivek Ramaswamy and various other public figures. And it's about H1-B visas and how migrant workers, in particular Indians, would go to work in America, and there's a debate whether they're taking American jobs and what's going on there. In a previous video a few days ago, I covered the perspective of Indians, which would be, Shiva Ayadurai, Vivek Ramaswamy, and certain other Indian people in America, or people who have views on this, right? Primarily the Indian perspective. And in this video, I want to give you the perspective of another demographic, Black Americans. We're going to start with a brief introduction, and then we're going to go and listen to Hotep Jesus, who was a guest on Joe Rogan's show, and a bit of his show and debate about this particular topic. So it's quite interesting to get the Black American perspective, not just the Indian perspective in the other video. So let me give you a bit of context here. So here on the left, you can see a tweet from Kecius Maximus, who's actually Elon Musk's nickname now on Twitter currently. He said, "The reason I'm in America, along with so many critical people who built SpaceX, Tesla, and hundreds of other companies, is that it makes America strong because of H1-B visas and primarily Indian coders and workers and engineers in these American companies." That's the point he's making with this tweet. Then he says, take a big step back and go F yourself, if you are not kind of supporting his view that H1-B visas in America is a good thing. He says, I'll go to war on this issue to the extent most of you can't comprehend. And then on the right, you see someone else who's called Grant Cardone. If you're not aware of him, he focuses on real estate and sales skills. And he's also another vocal supporter of Donald Trump. He was attending many Trump rallies, giving speeches, and he's very pro-business, pro-capitalism, things like that. And his perspective, he's another white American. He says, hating on H1-B is ridiculous. A few results, how I made USA better, how it made USA better. He's talking about Elon Musk's SpaceX and Tesla, Nvidia, which is like a tech company, Sergey Brin, co-founder of Google. He says, American education and work ethic have been slipping for years. It's not anti-American to say that, it's the truth. Worldwide, we are 13th in reading, 18th in science and math. Union protectionism and government promises have robbed us of the great American hustle, as in the work ethic. It's an easy times, as in like the consumerist times, you might say, in most recent decades, has created soft, weaker people. Hard times make tough people. I would hire an immigrant over an American born, assuming they have the same talents and same skills every time. Immigrants have more drive and are more appreciative and less entitled. And you can see the tweet from Elon has 13.8 million views, and the tweet from Grant Cardone has over 500,000 views. So it's interesting, these perspectives, because Grant Cardone is a white American. He's a CEO, multimillionaire, running several successful businesses, and he seems to be speaking quite highly of H1-B visa workers. And if you remember my previous video, I gave the perspective of an Indian who'd been in America for almost all his life, Shiva Ayadurai, and he sees this H1B1 visa effectively a scam to provide cheap, low-cost workers for American CEOs. So it's interesting to get that perspective. And then just to give you another bit of an intro of the type of heated debates we have here, right, between the different perspectives. I saw some white people on Twitter tweeting about this, giving their perspective. Someone said, how is this not the biggest political talking point right now? Since October 2019, native-born US workers have lost 1.4 million jobs. Over the same period, foreign-born workers, he doesn't specify whether it's H1B1 Indians or not, but he says over the same period, foreign workers have gained 3 million jobs. And when you really think about this, I would say that's an issue, right? If I was the leadership of a country, I would say, hold on, why have we given 3 million jobs to foreign workers coming to our country? Meanwhile, native-born workers, over 1 million, have lost their jobs. I would say that's a bad thing, right? Then you got a few other small excerpts of tweets. Someone asked AI, the Twitter AI Grok, what percentage of new jobs have gone to white males in America? So it says, and this is also mentioned in a recent Bloomberg article, from 2021 to 2024, approximately 6% of new jobs added by the S&P 100 companies in US went to white males. So as you can see there, that shows that, there is a lot of DEI bias against white men. If you think about it, rough percentages of different demographics, white women, white men, and then all the other races, men and women, the majority of America still is white white people, right? And 50% of that, of course, would be white men. So the fact that only 6% of new jobs in the last 3 years have gone to white men just shows a clear bias against white men. I think that's kind of logical approach there, right? It says here a brief excerpt from Charlie Kirk, who's like another white conservative commentator. He says he disagrees with Elon Musk and Vivek's support of H1B1 visas. He says, the American people are overwhelmingly voting for less immigration, and they want to prioritize the American children and American workers, not the American oligarch. And this is what you really see. People making a bit of a race thing between white workers and Indian workers, and you can say there's an element of that. But a lot of it, in this perspective, is let's talk about the contrast between what's in the best interest of the white American worker or American workers in general, and the leadership or the oligarch, the elite, the billionaire class who own all these big companies, and Elon Musk, Grant Cardone, who we just saw, or even Vivek Ramaswamy. They would prefer cheaper labor who might not be as skilled or talented as some of the American workers you might see, but they do the job at a lower wage and do it good enough for them to find it acceptable, right? And that's why they might look to hire H1B1 employees. So the thing is, H1B1 programs, I want to give you a quick few stats before we move forward, right? So it's extremely popular with many employers in America. Over 800,000 approved acts were passed in 2024, and it's a lot higher than the normal cap of 85,000. So, almost, let's just say, close to 1 million H1B1 visas were kind of approved in the last year or so. The average salary is under 120,000 US dollars, mainly for a lot of tech roles. And also, if we look at it in a lot more detail, a lot of those jobs are in tech. They could be for computer software, IT type of roles, software developer roles, and they're focused on lots of certified applications. They have to go through a lot of processes when it comes to the Department of Labor. So it's kind of an interesting scenario. But we've heard the Indian opinion. Let's listen to the Black American opinion, because this is another demographic who can feel somewhat of an impact with the Indian migration into America from a cultural perspective, from a job opportunity perspective, because it looks like the way the CEO works, they're not really prioritizing American workers, white or black. They're just focusing on who can do the labor for the cheapest, right? So just to give you a bit of a background to Hotep Jesus, because some of you will know him, some of you won't. He had an interview with Joe Rogan, over 1 million views. He knows Joe Rogan relatively well, I guess. And the way I would describe Hotep Jesus, essentially I would say Black American conservative values, right? But they don't blindly align themselves with the Republican Party or Donald Trump. They kind of think for themselves and think independently. And the term Hotep is kind of Pan-African, kind of pro-black, but it's not like anti-white or hating other demographics. And just to give a bit of context, the reason why it's called Hotep Jesus is because someone once trolled him because he had dreads, and he was speaking based on the way he looked. He might look like a black person who's Jesus. So he's not Christian, just for your context, because some people might think, why is he called Hotep Jesus, right? So he was one of the early supporters of Trump within the black community before it became a bit more socially acceptable. And then this other guy you see on your left is another key figure on Twitter. And a lot of these people are really early adopters. And he was one of the early adopters, the guy on the left. He's called Uncle Hotep. And he has quite interesting perspectives. He was one of the early Trump supporters, again, back in 2016, back when it was cool or normalized to kind of support Trump. I think this is very interesting, the perspective they share in their show. They have quite an interesting weekly show. They talk about culture from their perspective, and they're very good at thinking about things independently. So let's listen to a bit of their perspective here.
Now these people coming on there saying, oh, we can't get a job because they're taking jobs. They're going to work for less. Mind you, if you look at the high, medium, the high average salary, Indians is way up there. So how less are they taking, dickheads? How much less? Hold on, let me read. We got to get this on record. Let me Vivek saying. This will set these dickheads off. This is from Vivek Ramaswamy. The reason top tech companies often hire foreign-born and first-generation engineers over Native American isn't because of an innate American IQ deficient, a lazy and wrong explanation. A key part of it comes down to the C word, culture. Tough questions demand tough answers, and if we're really serious about fixing the problem, we have to confront the truth. Our American culture has venerated mediocrity over excellence for way too long, at least since the 90s and likely longer. That doesn't start in college, it starts young. A culture that celebrates the prom queen or the math Olympiad champ or the Jocko the valedictorian will not produce the best engineers. A culture that venerates Corey from Boy Meets World or Zack and Slater over Screech and Saved by the Bell or Stefan over Steve Urkel and Family Matters will not produce the best engineers. Fact, I know multiple sets of immigrant parents in the 90s who actively limited how much their kids would watch these TV shows precisely because they promoted mediocrity and their kids went on to become wildly successful STEM graduates. He's fucking nailing this shit. More movies like Whiplash, fewer reruns of Friends, more math tutoring, fewer sleepovers, more weekend science competitions, fewer Saturday morning cartoons, more books, less TV, more creating, less chilling, more extracurriculars, less hanging out at the mall. Most normal American parents look skeptical at these kinds of parents. More normal American kids view these kinds of kids with scorn. Those kinds of kids with scorn. If you grow up aspiring to normalcy, normalcy is what you will achieve. Close your eyes and visualize which families you knew in the 90s who raised their kids according to one model versus the other. Be brutally honest. Normalcy doesn't cut it in a hyper-competitive global market for technical talent. And if we pretend like it does, we'll have our asses handed to us by China. This is our Sputnik moment. We've awakened from slumber before, and we can do it again. Trump's election hopefully marks the beginning of a new golden age in America, while only if our culture fully wakes up. A culture that once again prioritizes achievement over normalcy, excellence over mediocrity, nerdiness over conformity, hard work over laziness. That's the work we have cut out for us, rather than wallowing in the victimhood and just wishing our legislating alternative hiring practice in existence. I'm confident we can do it too. These motherfuckers had a problem with that. You know what it is, Hotep Jesus?
What is it?
You know what it is? Where my phone? Thank you for the gift this sub. You know what it is?
What is it?
These motherfuckers that all fucking year talking about, oh, my IQ score. Oh, you got low IQ. La, 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 la. Your IQ stupid. These low IQ family. When somebody else calls them stupid, what the fuck? How dare you? That's what it is. These motherfuckers is mad that somebody called them dumbasses.
Facts.
No, you're the dumbass. Like how y'all call fucking black folks dumbasses. Now the Indian folks is calling you a dumbass, and now you motherfuckers is mad. He's giving you the blueprint of what they do. Turn that TV off. Hit them books. Forget that. No sleeper. You ain't sleeping over there nigga's house. Get that book. There's nothing wrong with what he said.
Nope.
It's a reality.
Facts.
These people don't want to face reality. They swear they're the king of the crop. They don't understand it's bigger than you. You tell niggas all the time, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Isn't that what they say in black folks?
Here we go.
Isn't that what they said? Pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
That's what they said. That's what they told us.
And now you motherfuckers got, what the fuck? Now you motherfuckers had problems. You mean to tell me that all these white... Listen, I want to make it racial. All these folks that are complaining talk about they can't get a job. These companies have to hire these people.
An interesting different perspective, right? And what he's saying is, on Twitter or X, where there's a lot more free speech, you're going to have a lot more heated racial debates. Let's just say that, and he's wording it as nicely as he can while we're on YouTube. Okay. So, there's many different perspectives here, right? Some people might say, are Indians competing effectively with white workers or American workers? People might have different perspectives. There's many statistics that show some of the highest earning families' incomes in America is actually from Indians, right? And then you've got these type of dynamics where he's talking about how white people or right-wing people might say that, okay, well, if black people aren't doing as well as white people in America, they need to work harder. They need to pull themselves up by the bootstraps, as he's saying here. They need to focus on focusing on their kids' education and having families sticking together and not having a high divorce rate or high rate of single motherhood. But he's saying, well, hold on, you hold us accountable to do these improvements. We might say a valid points, but then why can't the white man, if the white man is so smart and so technically gifted and has higher IQ than low IQ Indians, which is typically a common talking point on Twitter, why they are not able to compete and outsmart the Indian workers or be more efficient than them in a sense? So that's a different perspective to share there, right? So it's very interesting, the perspective of him saying how, hold on, why can we push a certain narrative on that community that they just need to be better to progress and they can't rely on DEI benefits? Then are the white people looking for DEI too, or can they compete with others rather than complaining when they don't get a certain amount of quota or hiring within the tech industry, or where they're competing with H1-B1 visas? I know there's a lot of nuance there. There's a lot of lower salaries, you might say, that are accepted by Indian workers. So interesting different perspectives here. Now, when it comes to Indians, we have to think about, okay, what's going on here? Are they coming to America and taking the low wage jobs? Are they taking a lot of the high paying corporate jobs? And the whole thing is what very interesting about the Indian demographic or Asian demographic broadly. There's sometimes a term given to them which is model minority, and model minority as in MODE is like, oh, they're a minority group, but they behave in the best way possible, as in maybe they work hard, they're not committing crime, they're never a big beneficiary of the DEI narratives, but they end up doing well and progressing through the corporate structure. So there's different perspectives there. I think that's kind of a broad generalization of how it works. But I think what's interesting about Vivek's perspective is that, America used to glorify a lot of greatness, right? Strong men, smart men, Arnold, genius innovation. But now it does normalize the kind of average consumer, average person. I don't want to harp on too much on that point, but there's not a lot of like great figures you can think of, right? When I'm thinking in recent years, you might think about Elon Musk and Tesla. We might think of maybe a few other billionaires who might have been great and achieved things. They just don't have that same culture, in my opinion, the same way they used to. And there's now, across the West, not just to criticize just America, there's now like a normalized, glorifying participation trophy culture, kind of a lot of mediocrity, and not pushing kids to excellence. Now, I'm not saying you have to push kids and everyone has to work themselves to death to get high quality jobs, or to be the person or the students at high school who get the top grades all the time, but there really is something to be said about that culture, right? I'm not saying everyone needs a tiger mum, like a really pushy mother, to push their kids to get top grades, but what is the culture there? How do they spend their time after school? Like, when I do compare the demographics and how my experience at school, my parents were kind of pushy that I would study, and I would spend a lot of my evenings studying, when a lot of other friends, maybe from different demographics, would maybe spend their time in the evening playing video games, socializing, things like that. And with me, while I did some of that, there just wasn't as much of that, and I think there was a bit more of a push to do well from an educational perspective and achieve something. And it is difficult, because I'm saying people do need a work-life balance or a study-life balance. If you're a student studying engineering, for example, we can't say that everyone has to be, like I say, hyper-competitive all the time, always focus on building technical skills. And the thing is that the America or any country in the West consider, do they want to train Americans more, or give them more opportunities, or hire more Indians? And we're seeing from a lot of these CEOs who would be white, for example, with Grant Cardone, he's saying rather than train more Americans, he'd rather hire more Indians. And he specifically said, even if they had the same skill level, you can see back at the start of the video, even if they had the same skill level, he'll opt for the immigrant, because he believes they're harder workers, even if they could had the same qualifications, right? Now, and this is the thing, it's quite interesting considered talking about how all of a sudden the right wing, or maybe white Americans, he's saying, are leaning into the victim culture, which they criticize the leftists for, or the feminists or the liberals. So, they want to play the victim when it's convenient. He's basically saying, well, okay, well, now you're playing the victim, right? Where's the personal accountability, pulling yourself up by the bootstraps type of narrative? So it's kind of interesting hearing his perspective. I wasn't sure where, different demographics would view this, right? Some people would maybe also be critical of Indian migration, but you saw in my first video, it was Indians critical of Indian migration, and in this case, Black Americans saying, well, hold on, maybe they do have a point, there is something wrong with American culture. And then also when you add that to the whole message about, like I say, the hypercritical, open criticism that constant Black Americans would have to deal with, you can't really reverse that and do the same thing with white people in terms of their culture, because they can take it more offensive, right? That's my impression, right? While I think there should be a narrative around white privilege or white fragility, but when it comes to if you use the term white mediocrity, obviously that would be a trigger moment for people. People say that is kind of unfair to make, because I don't see it so much as race, right? And I know people are going to get somewhat sensitive about these topics, but I think, you know, every culture had time for their civilization was really prospering. You had the ancient Greek empire, ancient Rome, all those things you learn from school, these great civilizations. And even with India, you had a time where you had these great Indian empires and really advanced architecture. And there's a whole school of thought by Julius Evola, I'm sure some of you are aware of that, time being circular or cyclical, and the whole context set of the Kali Yuga. And essentially different civilizations and people go through times where they're advancing and when they're in decline. You can even talk about Africa and ancient Egypt, which look quite advanced in certain ways compared to, you know, some of the issues they have now in Africa. So I don't think it's all about like blaming one race or the other, but it's about like, okay, cool, what are our values and how are we glorifying those values, right? Like I say, focusing on strong, smart men and focusing on caring, nurturing women, or masculine strength, feminine beauty. You just don't see these type of values in the West. Everything's just work, consume, and the kids are very much neglected. And that's where you see each generation getting weaker and not being as smart, or at least not having as many critical thinking skills, right? And that's why, you know, you've got a lot of young men, I would say, in the UK or even in America to a certain extent, who just kind of, maybe their father is too busy working and their mother's working too, and then they'll fall under the influence of someone like an Andrew Tate, who might have some good talking points, but also, you know, sometimes he has a little bit manipulative, in my opinion, right? So it's interesting to hear how different people think. Now let's continue to listen to this criticism of American culture from Hotep Jesus and Uncle Hotep.
So your Indian friends is going to school to be an engineer. Your African friends can't go outside, but they going to school for medicine. And this is what I was talking about with these FBA niggas. See, the FBA niggas ain't nothing but the woke right. Y'all a product of American culture where you accept mediocrity.
Just to quickly explain to you, the term FBA is referring to foundational Black Americans. What he means is Black Americans who've been descendants of many centuries of living in America. He wants to make a clear distinction between Black Americans who are integrated in American culture versus just Black migrants, say from Africa, who just recently came back in the last couple decades to get a job in America. So he's really referring to how the culture of mediocrity in America, in his view, has impacted both white Americans and Black Americans who've been living there for centuries.
Oh, let the kids go sleep over. Let the kids do this. Let them live. Meanwhile, them Chinese motherfuckers got them doing math 19 hours out of a 24-hour day at 2 years old. Then you wonder why they kicking your ass. The Patels, they doing math 18 hours out of the day and they 3 years old. Run rings around your baby. But you got your baby, your little white baby, this is the problem. It's not black people. This is American fucking culture. And I said that same exact example on the Griff Report a couple of weeks back. I said, yo, look at the media and how they treat intelligence in America. And I used that Screech example as one of them. Being intelligent is not applauded in America. You go to Africa, you know who the king is? The motherfucking spelling bee motherfuckers. Niggas couldn't even tell you who the American spelling bee champ is right now. I went to a chess tournament this summer, right? And I said to my boys, I said, I want you to look around the room and I want you to tell me who you see here at this chess tournament. I said, you see black people here? They said, no. I said, you see white people here? They said, no. I said, who do you see here? They said, Asians. Whole room full of Patels. Whole room full of Changs. And my son went in there. He took second place. He lost to a Patel. You know who ass he beat? The little white boy. The little white boy left after the second round because he got his ass beat so bad he couldn't take it. He left. The only two black people in the room was my boys. I went to another tournament in a white neighborhood on the other side of New Jersey. We go to the tournament. I said to my boys, I said, who do you see here? You see black people? No. You see white people? No. I said, who do you see? I see them Patels. So I asked them, I said, well, who do you think is going to be running this country? And they just sat there and looked at me. I said, you see the difference in culture? You got an intellectual sport like chess, and white and black people are nowhere to be found. I was sitting in the room with the parents, eavesdropping on conversations, and I hear the Indian man And the Indian man said, in India, if you become a GM, a grandmaster at chess, they give you $1 million. If you become a national master, which is 2 levels below a GM in chess in America, you know what you get from the colleges? $100 stipend. You be lucky they don't even give a scholarship for the intellectual arts in America. You know why? Because that's going to basketball and that's going to football. So you wonder why India, now keep in mind, who was the world chess champion this year? Indian. Gukesh Damaraju. Kicked everybody ass and made his way. And you know what the funny part is? When you go to these events, even at the GM level, they got like 8 Indian GMs. 8 Indian GMs trained by Anand, Vishy Anand. And waiting. Arjun Arrowgrass, Gukesh Damaraju. Who's the other little boy that was supposed to be the next one? Starts with a P. I can't remember his name. They got a laundry list of Indians kicking ass in chess. And you know where America is in that? Nowhere to be found. This year, they got the chess tournament in New York. Right now, there's a chess that started today. There's a Rapid and Blitz chess tournament in New York City happening right now. India is probably going to walk away the winner, if not Magnus. If not Magnus. Magnus is obviously the favorite, but if not, India is investing in intellectual arts. America is not. So when it comes to intellect, what did they say about the TikTok algorithm? They said in China, the TikTok algorithm show you kids doing math. Over here, it show you kids doing pranks and bullshit. Over there, the kids want to be engineers. Over here, your kids want to be streamers and YouTubers and suckers. We had a Asian chick. Earlier, I played the video. She said she going to stop going for her PhD so she could join OnlyFans. This is what American culture breeds. American culture is degeneracy. That's when I had to talk with Dave Smith and he was talking about America. I'm like, what fucking America? This shit ain't worth shit. Y'all can't even produce a fucking coder. All these vacant jobs and none of these niggas could code, none of these niggas could do math. And here y'all go on the internet worried about Mr. Patel. Mr. Patel put his kids in school and told these niggas to code. Told these niggas. And the thing is, these niggas suck at their job. These niggas is dumb. I came from the IT world. All them Patels I worked with in the computer department were stupid as shit. All of them. 9 out of 10 was dumb as shit. You got one good one out the bunch. But they show up to fucking work. They got the basic skill set. They gonna try hard.
So as you can see, that was a scathing takedown of American culture from his perspective. And I think when I think about broader Western culture, not just US, but UK culture, I'm thinking, what are they teaching the kids? So many things are being dropped into them about their privilege, about tolerance, diversity, mental health, so many things about mental illness, things like that, the gender ideology, the gender pronouns. And I'm not saying playing video games is a bad thing, but that seems to be quite heavily promoted to them. Political ideology around the climate, that's really pushed at them. Oh, the climate is changing, you have to be careful about that. Having fun, being popular on social media, things like that. And he's bringing up a good example, right, in terms of education culture within Asia, or within Asian culture in general. So I think that can be at times too intense, you know, expecting kids to go through school each day and then play chess in the evening or do some kind of maths after school clubs, things like that. Some of those things are good, but it's like, to what extent are you going to have that? I do think generally, you know, teaching kids to be productive and learn new skills without it being some cumbersome, you know, weighing them down with just learning tons of stuff for the sake of it. I think if you have a culture of education, a culture of teaching kids skills, that's the right approach, right? And it doesn't just have to be technical skills. It could be manual labor skills, which can save people a lot of money if they can do a lot of DIY themselves. And that's the thing, right? I think because Western culture has become kind of consumerist, when there's other cultures that are maybe focused on education, even if it is just technical skills like learning how to code, as he said, being good at education in any way, shape or form, becoming doctors, lawyers, accountants, things like that, even if they're boring jobs like being an accountant, these type of things are still valued as a social status, or being smart and having a corporate job that might be seen as a bit lame in the West in certain ways. They're still seen as a good social status of stability in Asian culture, not so much in Western culture where it might be labeled, like I say, boring, lame, nerd type of wordings compared to football and sports players who might be viewed as celebrities and cool people and cool guys, even at high school and college, right? So I think, what is going on in the West with the education system, I think the culture, particularly aimed at the younger people, is that education is in many ways a gateway for men, for young boys to fly the rainbow flag with the gender ideology, and for women to join OF. And he mentioned a case when it was an Indian woman, actually, who's based in the West. I think she was Indian. That it was a news story that went viral a few weeks ago around Christmas time. She was studying to become a doctor or some kind of technical skill. And she's in the West, she's in America, but she was making so much money from OnlyFans, from OF. What ended up happening is she was making millions of dollars, so she just decided not to continue her study. She didn't see the point, and she recorded a kind of announcement video that went on all the news sites. So the point is, it's like, what is the West encouraging with its culture? And I'm not America or the West or white people, or I would blame the liberals and the feminists if I was going to blame anyone. But this establishment, the elite, the people who run Hollywood, secret societies, whatever we want to call them, essentially, they do have clearly an agenda. And that agenda is depopulation. That agenda is lowering living standards. It's encouraging women to focus on their careers or be consumers or produce content creators in the form of OF, for making men weak or dumber or demoralized. That's a clear agenda, getting people not to reproduce by making them join the rainbow flag community. All these things are kind of obvious agendas at this point. And the thing is, he mentions also about Indians not necessarily being smarter, but doing perhaps a mediocre job, but doing it good enough for the corporation itself, right? Or coming into work and at least to do a good job. And I think that's a good point. Of course, these are somewhat generalizations, but I think it's a fair point to say that, it's not that India is necessarily producing the world-class engineers, but if they're doing a decent job for a lower wage, companies are going to be more inclined to hire them. And even if they're not the smartest, they will try to get the job done the best way they can, compared to, again, a generalization, maybe other demographics who might not want to or have that much work ethic to get on with it, even if they're not the best. I think, when it comes to DEI and discrimination, we have to decide either we wholly remove DEI and discrimination, or how can some demographics say that they're the victim when other demographics are hired? And I understand it's a tricky topic. In my personal view, a country should just focus on its nation, focus on its nation's people, focus on its own countrymen, which means that, it should only be hiring within the country unless there's an absolute necessity that no one in the country can do that. Then you would rely on migrant workers. That's the obvious approach to me. Be self-sufficient in terms of a country, growing its own food, having the technical skills from the people who work in office jobs, having migrant workers, maybe 2 to 5% migrant workers for those highly skilled things. Maybe you have an expert in a particular element of medicine from a foreign country, then you need to bring in that 1 or 2 doctors. That's the type of thing that would be a smart approach, right? But then when you have all these type of different racial issues which are occurring in America and the West right now, but particular cultural differences, and I think we all need to take a serious look at our own lives. And if you consider yourself part of a particular racial demographic or community, is what is the cultural aspects here? And that's one of the interesting things about diversity. It poses a lot of challenges. We can see all the issues with around race and religion going on in the UK and in the US and things like that. But what it does is it allows you to compare in a very objective way different racial demographics, and in this case it's culture, right? You might say, okay, well, this culture, they do focus on more education for their kids. This other culture, they do focus on more on maybe other things like philosophy, for example, or enjoying spending time in nature. And you can really take an objective look and pick and choose which aspects of different racial demographics or their lifestyle habits that might be good or negative, and choose what to focus on. And that's what he's trying to do here, and that's why he has an interesting perspective. It's more of an objective look. He's not ethnically Indian, he's not a white American, but he's a black American, and he is providing somewhat of an objective take on this criticism of different demographics and their culture specifically, not attacking their race, but being for the different cultural aspects. And the thing is, the American education system, even the UK education system, I think it is kind of terrible, right? From what I've seen, there is a lot of third world education. And this is the thing about the West, more and more. You have first world living prices, living costs, and third world living standards. So I'll say that again. You have first world living costs and third world living standards, right? You're paying so much money just for your basic food costs, and a lot of it's sprayed with pesticides. It's not necessarily super high quality. If you're in a third world country, you could probably get the same type of food which has less chemicals in it. Same thing with a lot of education, you know, a lot of it's not that high quality. A lot of things you can learn online for a fraction of the price. And that's what ends up happening. He's talking about there are instances where he'll be talking to other parents, Indian parents, and their kids will be tutoring on the weekend. They'll be getting tutoring lessons, like additional teaching on the weekend to make them best at maths and best at English. And I'm not saying kids have to spend their whole weekend studying, but it's like, what is the culture in your particular demographic or family? Like if the culture is basically what you do in terms of learning skills, whatever you do during your school day, do a little bit of homework in the evening and spend your weekends, do what you want to do. There's nothing wrong with that, but then you're going to be competing with people who are not doing that. I remember like going to school all day, studying most of the evening and the weekends. And I'm not saying that's the right approach. There should have been more of a balance, but obviously certain demographics are going to do better than others based on how much time they dedicate to, in effect, developing their skills. Whether YouTube channel, for example, I put loads of time into it, and it's doing well than when I was putting less time into it. And that's just the way it is, right? How much effort and energy and time are you going to exert into something? And also the thing is, a whole narrative that's quite interesting that you hear on the right a lot, if you're familiar with lots of politically incorrect opinions, maybe on 4chan and things, is around IQ. And the thing is, if we're going to say that other demographics have low IQ, which is typically a talking point that I hear sometimes on the right wing, and I'm ethnically Indian, if you weren't aware, there is a perspective that comes across where they look at IQ differences between races and say, well, Indians have lower IQ. But the thing is, to what extent is that a reflection of reality? Because also you have the conflicting narrative that Indians typically do well in a lot of educational perspectives, as he's mentioning here, playing chess, things like that, doing well in maths, engineering, science, also being high income earners in terms of one of the highest demographics of family earners in the US, I believe, is Indian. So it's like there's lots of contrast here, and it's like, okay, well, maybe if a demographic isn't genetically the smartest race, but if they put in the work ethic, then can that make up for so-called low IQ impacting their work ability? A lot of sensitive topics, you know, this topic of race realism and how IQ can vary between races and things. I think it's a bit of a blanket statement, right? It's too much of a generalization. And even when we're talking now, there are a lot of generalizations. I had plenty of friends. I'm ethnically Indian, so I had friends who were Indian and just didn't study much, and they went to completely trash colleges because they just didn't want to study at high school, and they ended up getting really like low quality jobs. Then I had other friends who were from a black background, or they were white. Some of them did well, some of them didn't do well. A lot of it effort, right? Which is partly impacted by the culture you're in, the values your parents give you, whether they tell you to work hard or to have fun. It really does depend on individual effort. But I think the criticism, broadly speaking, of American culture is somewhat valid, right? I don't think we can just write it off and say that Vivek's wrong and these two black Americans are wrong, and you know, the only criticism that we're only people who like to criticize American culture would be a white American. I think there's different perspectives, and there is some honest criticism to be had here. So let's continue to listen about the impact of capitalism and how it can impact how a country functions.
Let's talk about the capitalism part of this.
Okay.
Isn't this just capitalism?
This is pure capitalism at its finest.
So what are they complaining about?
Because they communist.
That's another thing. Like, this is just capitalism. And if y'all deny, like, these companies, say, like, you, like, these companies, like, yo, man, we're cutting back immigration. What's this, these companies? And companies have done this. Fuck it. Oh, you ain't gonna let the Indians over here? Bet. We're closing up shop in Ohio. We're taking our fucking shit over to India. We're gonna open a center over here, do this tech worker over here, and just bring it back over here. All y'all motherfuckers lost your jobs. Like, this is chestnut checkers, man. Listen, y'all might think y'all asked. I see somebody tweeted said, "We asked for America first." Like, okay, yeah, all right, whatever. Listen, this one world government is coming, whether you like it or not. It's coming. This global economy, this global government, this one world normal nation is coming, whether you like it or not. I would advise to put yourself in the best position you can be for this country.
Yes.
And if that means you're going to have like this make America a global hub, then that's what it's got to be.
That's
If you
what's
don't
meant to
want it
be.
a global hub, they're just going to move that to Tel Aviv or fucking London or wherever. They'll take it someplace else.
They're going to move it to Africa.
Africa. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is the fucking wrong fight. And I don't know. I guess I should have saw this coming from where, you know, how to slander and everybody started making said these content creators, these grifters, all of a sudden, everybody started making Indian jokes. This was like 8 months ago. Notice this. That agent, gargantuan woman you brought to the grifties started that shit. She was the first one in.
She was first one in. She was definitely on the front lines.
Right?
Because her ex was Indian or some shit like that.
I'm like, something's wrong here, man.
Vivek, JD Vance's wife, Kamala,
Haley,
Nikki, aka Nimrod.
Like that, all that isn't by chance, you know.
They can't read the writing on the wall.
It's over unless you will. You listen. Either pull yourself up by your bootstraps, or it's over.
But you hit the nail on the head before. We used to talk about capitalism.
Yeah.
Now, I did a whole look back on Europe and showed these motherfuckers where the European has never been capitalist, ever been capitalist. It was so bad they hated capitalism in Europe. And I'm talking about Europe before the Bolshevik Revolution. Chad, if you watch the Griff Report, I took you down the history lane. They hate competition. The European has always hated competition. So when you say, yo, this is capitalism, I'm like, you're right, this is capitalism. How capitalism works. They gonna get cheap labor if they can get cheap labor. You ain't got the skills to do it. And you ain't gonna do it at the pay rate. Then you said niggas was too lazy to do the job. And we said niggas not lazy to do the job. We just not doing the job at the pay rate. So now here the tech jobs go. They doing this shit for dirt cheap in India. You can get an app built for $10 in India. Shit ain't gonna work, but you can get one built. So now they run into the same problems as the black community and they crying about it. And I'm like, oh, y'all some communists because this is part of capitalism. Capitalism means competition. You're gonna have to compete. Oh, you don't want to compete. So you're a communist then. You're a socialist. Oh, the government has to do something about this. Oh, you're a communist. Which I've been calling the woke right out about. Oh, these niggas communists too. This entire country's built off of communism. But when Hotep Jesus said, I'm just being a hater, I'm just being a contrarian. Nah, y'all niggas act like communists.
Woke right got treated like some niggas and snapped. I wasn't so bad. I'm like, yo, so how does it feel?
When I saw this news break on the timeline, I ain't smiled this hard all year.
Come on, stop it.
I said, this is the best news I've seen. I love watching these niggas squirm. Because immigrants, cheap labor. Us, niggas, slaves.
Then what? It was Irish, right?
Irish. The Asians built the railroad. Remember the Asians built the railroad?
Irish,
Italians, Germans. What American white man built? Not a damn thing. I think it built a bar. That's what he built.
Ozzy Wallace says American whites spent too much time hating on niggas and now find themselves as niggas.
This has been a problem. We like, yo, y'all better stop focusing on us. Y'all better pay attention to the times.
So there we go. Like I say, hopefully no one out there is too sensitive. These are just different opinions from different demographics, right? And of course, there'll be people within each demographic, as we saw from my first video, Indians who don't support H1-B1 visas. For Indians, we have Black Americans who agree with the criticisms of American culture, even the negative impacts of mediocrity that they think have impacted their community, not just white Americans, right? So this is the thing about capitalism, right? And this is what I think you can have capitalism within a country, people competing fairly within a country, but we don't really have that. You have globalists where major corporations want to hire super cheap labor and pay them super low wages. You can imagine our smartphones, the smartphone I'm using right now, all the electronics we have are made by really cheap labor who aren't given a fair ride, who are really heavily exploited by these companies through a race to the bottom, which means they go and find the cheapest labor to extract the raw materials and produce these phones and things, right? And then we also have, people within a country who want to have, decent wage to earn enough to have a house, have a family, and have a decent middle class lifestyle, which just doesn't exist anymore. And it's not just with H1-B visas in terms of Indian migrants and white tech workers. You can see it throughout every industry. For example, in the UK, many Eastern Europeans have moved to the UK, and some of the manual labor jobs, construction, kind of, being a plumber and electrician, they've taken a lot of those jobs. So I'm sure there's many white people who are British people who've kind of lost their jobs in that competition because they can't compete with the lower wages that they're willing to accept, right? So the thing is, it's not just about race, or lots of people want to make it about race, but it really is about prioritizing the people in the countrymen versus the migrants or people from other countries. And the thing is like a lot of the times we need to think about how to determine America first, or putting a country first. Are you putting the American worker first or the American billionaire? And that's the key factor here, right? And you're learning, of course, all these billionaires that many people supported, particularly over the last year, because they were all supporting Trump and they're all pro-truth and pro-free speech and pro-good business and all about lowering the living costs and things like that, lowering the inflation rate. And it's like, hold on, a lot of these billionaires, obviously they're out for their own best interest, even if that means not giving you a job after they were saying that they're in the same boat as you and we're all going to support each other as Americans, right? And he's got a good point here, right? A lot of people think that maybe because they see Trump, or maybe because they see a bit of more people waking up through the Great Awakening, that your system still doesn't have a plan to move to a one world government, which I think is obviously the goal that they're going to keep pushing in. They might push it through the right wing, to the left wing, but that's the end goal that they have. And I believe, and I hope humanity does continue to wake up and push against these kind of tyrannical forces. But that's where the system wants things to head, right? And he's got a fair point here around teaching your kids to have a good skill set and try to do their best to survive in this hyper-competitive hellscape. Because I don't believe everything about life should be about competition and competing with everyone else in the world. But it's a tough reality that many people are going to have to deal with, and many people just won't make it, because unfortunately that's what the globalized workforce means. It means a middle class, a white guy in the west coast of America is competing for a tech job with an Indian in Mumbai who has a living cost of less than a third of what he has, right? And that's the kind of difficulty here. And also when he's talking about this, he's saying a lot of the changes you're seeing on the power positions in the West are going to Indians, right? Because Indians typically, like I say, they might play the education game and try to get the top qualifications and get those top corporate roles, or play along with the system rather than challenge it. He made several examples of Kamala Harris, who apparently has Indian descent. Who knows what her real descent is these days anyway. Vivek, J.D. Vance, who's the vice president for Trump, his wife is actually from an Indian background. Lots of Indians taking high-paying corporate jobs, and even some of them change their name. You might know another politician in America called Nikki Haley. She looks white, but her actual ethnicity is Nimrata Randwa. I think that's her original name. So she's actually from Indian background again. And he says there's a lot of Indians who are in these prominent positions who are kind of playing along with the elite of the system to kind of be the enforcers of whichever direction they want the world to head in, right? And the thing is about the phrase pulling yourself up by the bootstraps, it puts people in a position where they have to compete even with, one arm tied behind their back. They're all going into a boxing fight with one arm tied behind their back, and that's how difficult it can be when, even if someone wants to compete with maybe another country, but because their living costs are so disparate and such a big difference, it becomes so difficult to compete, even if you're highly skilled, right? You can't pull yourself up by the bootstraps when millions of workers are coming into a country, for example, in any industry, not just H1B1 visas, and they're competing for the same jobs with you, right? And the thing is, he's mentioning a good thing about European culture, and in terms of whether it's capitalist, whether there's a level of protectionism to prevent competition from outside the nation or outside the trading area like the European Union. And I think there's interesting different perspectives there. And I think, like I say, the only way to manage that effectively is to limit migration and only allow competition within the country, because it becomes very questionable whether you can have this type of capitalist thing globally. When it comes to the West, now I think, is the West necessarily, if we think about all the great Western civilizations, Rome, Greece and things like that, are they naturally hyper-competitive, right? And in really the question is any culture hyper-competitive? I think it was always about having an element of country, tribe or empire where you do maybe have higher virtues, whether, like I say, that's strength, beauty, virtue, maybe it's a religious virtue in the sense of Christianity, things like that. producing things that are aesthetically pleasing, having an element of living in a sustainable way with nature. I think those are higher values rather than just being the most productive. And when I think about Western culture, based on my understanding, I think those were a lot of the things that were valued, not necessarily just technological progress for the sake of it, or someone being the smartest person for the sake of it. So you might have a valid point around the West not necessarily being inherently focused on capitalism. Maybe that was pushed on them based on the powers that be. So it's an interesting thing to think about. And like he says, you compare that to the narrative that's pushed on black people that they need to work harder and pull themselves up by the bootstraps, get their act together. It's like, can white people react to that type of narrative being pushed on them by their own side, by someone like a Grant Cardone or an Elon Musk, right? And it's like, if someone's critical of that, a lot of the times there'll be gaslighting, right? Because obviously there are certain disadvantages, in black communities, maybe from poorer neighborhoods in America. They're not allowed to play the victim. People will say, oh, just overcome all those adversities. If you say the thing to maybe the white Americans, they might not react so positively. They might say, well, there are some valid differences. They can't compete with Indian workers who are accepting lower wages, right? And then people might accuse them of playing the victim, or that they want DEI for white people, right? Or they want some sense of communism and socialism. So it's a very tricky type of dynamic to play into when everyone has to play in-group preference, look out for the interest of their own tribe while competing with others where there's unfair competition occurring. So it's a very tough, contentious issue, because this one issue of H1-B1 visas or migrant workers, it really forces everyone to confront what is a sustainable system, right? Should it always be looking for the cheapest labor source for maximizing profits for the companies? That's what you're told. Capitalism is about maximizing profit, even if it comes at the expense of a country being destroyed and the middle class being destroyed. Is that how far you're going to focus on capitalism? Not saying communism or socialism's right, but it really makes you raise these questions, right? What is okay in terms of labor output for a person? Are they going to maximize the labor output to the point where they reach their breaking point? And what we're seeing is really who are winning right now is these globalist empires, these globalist companies, not countries. It's companies winning, not countries. Multinational corporations are winning, not countries, not even multinational country organizations like a European Union or the United Nations. A lot of the times it's just major companies who are really skimming off the top, skimming the benefit of the productivity growth. Wage growth is not occurring for most people. It's people at the top getting super rich. Now, a lot of these things are important to look at. Companies winning, not countries, not the common man. And a lot of the times race and gender are kind of dragged into this, particularly race in this case, and pitting people against each other when it's really who's winning. It's the company who's winning. It's not the white man or the Indian man. White man might be losing his job in America. Indian man might be getting a job, but for a relatively low wage. And who's winning is really the company and the corporation. But meanwhile, you've got different racial demographics fighting amongst each other. So just to conclude, my view is that diversity doesn't work at a macro level necessarily. In the micro level, at individuals, people work well with each other. But at a group level, large groups typically have an in-group preference, their own tribe, their own race, their own demographic. And everyone can't necessarily conform to that group due to differences, right? And this puts a lot of pressure when it comes to different demographics being somewhat tribalistic, somewhat looking for their capitalist interest of low wages and maximizing profits. So it can be quite a difficult, contentious issue. I think that, corporations and individualism is fundamentally anti-human, even though we're put in that position where you've got to kind of play that game if you want to survive and climb the corporate ladder, for example. People are not just self-interested. They do have a group interest. People are more naturally tribalistic, and normally the smartest and the strongest men would rise to the top of that tribe and look out for the best interest of that tribe. But you don't really have that right now. You have people who are kind of squabbling amongst each other just to get 1 foot above each other in terms of a fancier job title, a fancier position in a corporate company, corporation that they could lose at any moment. So it's a very interesting, contentious issue. I've got one more video coming up in this series, which will be the perspective of le white man, to quote Jared Taylor. We've heard the Indian perspective, we've heard the Black American perspective. Let me know in the comments what you think. Don't take anything too personally. Of course, these are broad generalization statements, thinking about different perspectives. I've told you what my perspective is. It's look out for the best interest of the people in the country rather than hiring migrant workers, and put limitations on corporations on how they can really exploit labor to this extent. So If you are new to the channel, I've worked in the finance industry for over a decade, Goldman's, Morgan Stanley, and other companies. So I offer career advice, link in description if you want to speak with me directly. Let everyone know in the comments what your particular view is of these issues around migrant workers. And there are 2 recommended videos on your screen right now. I'll see you next time.